What's happening, everybody? Happy Thursday. Do we have preseason games tonight? I don't even know. Tomorrow. Okay. Week 2 of preseason kicks off tomorrow. I don't suspect we'll see as many starters play as we did week 1. There was a few extra starters that played week 1 that we typically see, that we typically expect. Don't know that we'll see as many in the second preseason game, but we will see. Or the second week, excuse me. But that kicks off tomorrow night as we continue to roll through preseason. Inching closer to the start of the regular season. So, obviously, focus is continuing to shape, mold your plan of attack for your redraft leagues, which are probably taking place in 2 weeks' time. So we got wide receiver rankings today. We did top 12 running backs a couple of weeks ago. We're doing top 12 wide receivers today. And there's a little bit probably of a shakeup from the order that has been the story of the offseason, or the rankings of the offseason thus far. Just, it's what happens naturally with training camp developments as we get closer to the season. So we'll do the top 12 wide receiver rankings today. AMA as always. And then we'll get into the news and notes as well. And there are a couple of big ticket items to talk about that went down today. So we'll get into all of that prior to the rankings. And then, of course, if anybody has anything, any other talking points that they want to discuss today, any questions, questions about players, questions about strategy, now's the time. Always encouraged, always welcome. Feel free to bring those to the table. We will start with the big news and notes from today. 2, both involving some significant legal situations. We got some type of an update today from both, and that includes Rashee Rice and Quinshon Judkins. So talk briefly about those to start things off. Let me pull up the Rashee Rice headline, but the short story is he will be eligible to play for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So that's the significant portion of it here. His hearing was scheduled for, I believe, September 30th. I'm just looking to see where the specific details are. I probably scrolled past it. Likely to play the first 4 games of the season and is expected to have his disciplinary hearing with the NFL on September 30th. This is a different update than I think most would have expected in this situation. I think a lot of people were preparing for Rice to miss the first 4 to 6 weeks of the year. Now he's eligible to play for the first 4 weeks. And now we're likely looking at a mid-season suspension as opposed to one to start off the year. The first situation that comes to mind as far as the last time something like this happened was Ezekiel Elliott. Was that back in 2016? Almost 10 years ago is the first one. That's the first situation that comes to mind. Was Ezekiel Elliott started the season with the Dallas Cowboys, had an off-field incident. It wasn't the same incident. They were 2 separate incidents. But Zeke faced discipline from the NFL. was allowed to play the first few games of the season. I forget what that process was. I don't know if it was similar. I don't know if like the legal I guess, ruling or whatever you want to call it prior to the season was, or if it was a 1-to-1. But Zeke faced discipline from the NFL, was able to start the first few games of the Cowboys season, and then a mid-season suspension, which wasn't unexpected, was actually handed down, and Zeke had to miss. Actually, I think he played like the first 2 months of the season, if I remember correctly. He was suspended for like 6 games. And it started, I think, in like week 10. So Zeke actually made it through the first 2 months of the season before actually getting hit with the suspension. But it did happen. It did come down. And I think Zeke had to miss like weeks 10 to 15 or something like that. I guess Rice is facing a similar situation, potentially, where he can play the first 4 games. We'll see if the hearing sticks on September 30th. I don't know what the potential is or possibility, likelihood is for that date, for that hearing to be pushed back. I wouldn't say it's 0. Just we see, these legal dates, these things get kicked around all over the place all of the time. It's not uncommon to see things get pushed back. I don't know what the chances are for Rice that it does get pushed back. But for argument's sake, let's say it doesn't. Let's say the disciplinary hearing happens on September 30th, and he probably gets slapped with some type of suspension, maybe in the range of 4 games. I don't know if it can be more than that. So now you're looking at Rice playing first 4 weeks of the year, and he could be out from anywhere from weeks 5 through 10. And I believe the Chiefs have a bye week in that stretch. Their bye week does in fact come in that stretch of now, and with this updated calendar, when we might expect to see Rice serve the suspension. I'm just double checking the Chiefs. Double checking the Chiefs schedule right now. They have a week 10 bye. All right, so it's not week 9, it's week 10. Still, though, if he misses 4 weeks, after he plays the first 4 games, that's weeks 5 through 8, potentially 5 through 9 if it's a 6-game suspension. If it's a 6-game suspension, we're looking at it crossing over the bye week plus the extra game after that. If it's a 4-game suspension and it does take place in this new timeline that we have, maybe whenever immediately after the disciplinary hearing happens, if Rice gets hit with the suspension, if it's 4 weeks, he's missing weeks 5 through 9. If it's 6 weeks, he's missing 5 through 12. So your best case scenario, in all likelihood, given the fact that the Chiefs' bye week is week 10, is that the best case scenario, if you have Rashee Rice, is he plays the first 4 weeks as expected, and then he comes back week 11, and then you have him at least for the month prior to the fantasy playoffs and the fantasy playoffs. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you draft Rashee Rice with probably a top 40 pick to maybe top 50. It depends on how strongly you feel about Rice and how aggressive your league mates are getting Rice, whether they think they're getting him at a discount or not. But a worst case scenario is a 6-game suspension takes us actually through to week 11. Actually, it's more like week 12 if he has to serve games, not just weeks. Then a worst case scenario is if it's a 6-game suspension, Rice misses from weeks 5 through 9. That's the first 5 games. Then the week 10 bye, and then week 11 against Denver. You don't have him again until week 12. So you're holding a guy for, you're drafting in a worst case scenario, which is potentially going to happen, you're drafting a guy who will be available for you for the first 4 weeks, but then will not be available to you for the next 7 weeks after that. There will be a 7-week stretch in a potential worst case scenario where you do not have Rashee Rice. I don't know that I can advocate for drafting for him. I think it feels like, there's going to be some people who now feel better about Rashee Rice. Oh, well, at least he's going to play for the first month of the season. And in those 4 games, you will get a guy who has top 25, upside from, flex when you include running backs and wide receivers and tight ends. Like, he's that good. Rashee Rice was on pace for a monster season last year. He was putting up huge numbers. There's no reason to believe he can't do that again. So you are probably getting a good performance from Rashee Rice for the first month of the season. If, all else equal, he meets expectations or at least comes somewhat close to them. On a week-by-week performance basis. That's all well and good. But then to not have him for the guts of the season, for that stretch of the season where it's like, that's where you learn. Am I a contender or am I a pretender? Like, am I a contender and I know what I need to do to revamp my roster, or am I not built for this because of, injuries that are hitting and I don't have Rice available to me because he's serving a suspension that I already knew about? There's a lot of risk. I would say there's even more risk with Rashee Rice now than there was had the suspension just been slapped from the beginning, games 1 to 6. Okay, we know he's not going to be available then. His ADP plummets, but somebody can take a chance on him in the 10th round or 9th round because you'll have him from week 7 onward. This one extends the amount of games that he's not, or the amount of consecutive weeks anyway, where he's not going to be available to your team. Rashee Rice is a difficult sell. I ultimately think I am drafting around him this year. I would need to see he would need to fall to the 7th or 8th round for me. And I don't think he's going to, because he's going to play the first 4 weeks of the season. So I think Rashee Rice is about as close to off my board, actually, as he can be, especially considering how talented he is. It's unfortunate, but there's a lot of risk in there that I don't know that I want to chase that. That's a lot of missed time in the guts of the season when you are, that's when you're clinching your playoff berth. The meat of the season, when you need to stack together wins and you have a key player who is not going to be available for you. That's a tough sell. That's a tough sell. All right, so those are my thoughts on Rice. And if anybody feels differently, if you like Rice now, feel free to share why. We can have a conversation about it. And then let's see. And then Quinshon Judkins. That was the other big piece of the other big news to drop today. Prosecutors are declining to file charges in the Quinshon Judkins domestic violence case. So after a lot of questions about where this would go, where this was headed, the charges against Quinshon Judkins have officially been dropped. I will read, let's see. There was, I think, there was an attorney or there was a reporter for the Cleveland Beat, shared details of the decline memorandum. And so what we now know given the Judkins situation. The incident was not captured. This is now like direct quoting. This incident was not captured on any video surveillance. There are no independent witnesses to the incident. Although the victim had photos showing injuries sustained, there were also videos in that same time frame where no injuries were observed to the victim. Additionally, the victim's injuries depicted in the photos could be explained by either account of the incident. And finally, there was a delayed report of the incident. The delay is problematic as the victim was alone on numerous occasions without the defendant, had the ability and resources to make the report without his knowledge, but chose not to do so. So, I guess basically there's just, they can't, the charges were dropped because they're nobody can be determined, like, I guess, guilty of anything given the evidence that they currently have, I guess, tied to the case. So charges dropped for Quinshon Judkins. He is expected to sign his rookie contract, shortly. It was the term, and he will report to camp. So as it turns out, after all, Judkins will presumably play this year. I guess it is still possible for the NFL to act. We have seen the NFL act from a disciplinary perspective, take disciplinary action, even when a case is not brought to trial. So Judkins might not be out of the woods yet as far as missed time. He has also, as far as missed time, he could miss games, and he's already missed a lot of practice. He will play this year. At least now the pathway has cleared for Judkins to play this year. But he still needs to report to camp. He has missed a lot of time. And how long is it going to take him to climb the depth chart, having missed so many practices? He's going to miss, he missed the first preseason game and all of the practices leading up to the first preseason game. I don't know that he would have played in the preseason game, but he would certainly have been practicing under normal circumstances. And there's no way he's going to be ready for this weekend's game. So he's not going to play in this game either. I guess the earliest that he could practice, I guess, is tomorrow. I guess he could practice on Friday. That's not out. If they can get a contract done tonight, if the team and the player feel confident that they can get a contract done tonight and it makes sense for them to move forward tonight just to get him on the practice field tomorrow as early as possible to start incorporating him into their game plans, I guess he could practice tomorrow. I guess next week is a little more likely as the dust kind of settles on this news and whatever potential ramifications there could come from signing a contract while we are unsure what the NFL's ultimate ruling is going to be on this. So there's a little bit of a gray area there. However, the pathway is now clear for Judkins to play this year. I just realized I did not share this stream link with my Discord friends, so I am going to do that now. Okay. I cannot believe I forgot to do that. But also, yes, I can. So, the question now, is where do you draft Quinshon Judkins? In best ball on Underdog Fantasy, he had fallen. His ADP had fallen to 153. So there was an extreme lack of confidence that he would play this year. That is going to naturally climb. I am curious to see how high it goes. I would imagine, I mean, his ADP prior to this fallout was in the 80s. People were taking him on in underdog drafts in the 7th and 8th rounds. And now as over the past couple of weeks, you could get him in the 13th, 14th round. So it'll probably settle somewhere in the middle. So going from the 8th round to the 14th round, let's split the difference and say now he's an 11th round pick. Let's say he's anywhere from mid 11th to like maybe the back half of the 11th round to the top half of the 12th round. Let's say that's where his ADP settles. That's fine. That's fine to take a shot on him because now he's more of a dart throw. But unfortunately, that's his trajectory is a little bit more of a dart throw because we don't know how his season is going to shape out. He is a rookie who has missed valuable practice time, crucial, critical practice time to get him involved, acclimated with the offense. Everything that comes with practice, cadence, timing, the packages that you're going to be involved in. Now, I'm sure the Browns had visions of Judkins being involved regularly on the offense. So, I'm sure whatever game plans that they have that involve more of that type of usage, they will get involved and incorporated as quickly as possible and get Judkins acclimated there. But this could have all have been happening over the past 3 weeks. That's a lot of time at this time of the year to have missed. So Judkins is fine. 10th, 11th round. He may go more in he may slide back up to the 9th round in redraft leagues where an emphasis is put on running backs. But just be prepared. There's a lot of risk that remains with a guy like Judkins. So, proceed with caution. He's more palatable to me when you're considering drafts. He's more palatable to me at cost than a Rashee Rice is. But he still comes with some risk. Probably a guy where if you do draft him, just be prepared to hold for a while with minimal expectations. For at least the first month of the season, we may not see much from Judkins, but at least his arrow is now trending up. All right, so talked about Rice, talked about Judkins. Again, if anybody has any thoughts or feelings about either one of these players, again, big news dropping today for both Rashee Rice and Quinshon Judkins. So just went over my thoughts from a fantasy perspective really quickly. If anybody wants to talk shop on any of those players or both of those players, I'm happy to do that. Let's see if there's any other big pieces of news today to get to. Let's see. Oh, and the charges for Isaiah Bond were also dropped, and he signed with the Browns. So there you go. Matthew Stafford will work out on Saturday. Hopefully his back responds a little bit better. At least there's a plan in place for him to practice. But, of course, Matthew Stafford was supposed to work out this last Saturday and practice all this week, and that did not happen. He worked out on Saturday, but he did not practice on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. I guess that means he is not practicing today either. Yeah, a little concerned about Stafford. This is critical. As far as I'm concerned, this one's critical because it comes after the second preseason game, and now we've only got one preseason game left. Not that Matthew Stafford is going to play in or needs to play in preseason games, but the point is the clock is ticking. We're in crunch time with only weeks to go before the start of the regular season. If Stafford either cannot get through a workout on Saturday or continues to not practice on Monday, if one of those two things happens, and both happen. If he can't get through the workout on Saturday, then he's not going to be practicing on Monday. if that happens, or if he doesn't practice on Monday, even if he works out on Saturday, it's panic mode time. We have to move off of your Rams, probably by at least half a round as far as ADP. You got to slide them back because now there's legitimate concern about the starting quarterback's availability for the season. This Saturday is critical for Stafford, as far as I'm concerned. This will either alleviate any concerns we had about drafting Puka, Kyron, and Devontae Adams, or it will escalate any concerns. There will be no in between. We will either feel a lot better or a lot worse, depending on what happens with Stafford this weekend. So that one is worth keeping an eye on. And I'll have thoughts on that one way or another next week after we find out what happens. Jordan Love expected to return to practice next week. Surgery on his left thumb. Not great, but at least it's minor. Every other update from today is just, practice reps and the like. So I think that does it for news and notes. We can just go ahead and get into wide receiver rankings. I'm doing the top 12 rankings. I don't know that I have too much to say on a lot of these guys, but I still want to make sure I get my thoughts out there because they do differ from consensus a little bit. Current ADPs a little bit, just based on the current landscape, what we know that's coming out of each training camp and how that impacts certain players in the wide receiver 1 tier. None of these guys are going to be available after the second round. Maybe the wide receiver 12 or 11 are available at the top half of the third round. Half PPR scoring, running backs are prioritized, or standard scoring in general where wide receivers are deprioritized. But in half PPR where there's balanced leagues, and in full PPR for sure, none of these guys will be available after the end of the second round. So we all have high expectations of these guys, and everyone is going to have slightly different names probably at the end of the rankings. But nevertheless, it's worth it to talk about and go over because there are tiers within the elite, and ultimately making the right call on a stud A versus stud B can make a significant difference. We have high expectations for all of these guys, but they all have, different little nuggets that we want to make sure we share for each, or that I have for each, just so that we're, considering all options, weighing the landscape of where things sit and stand, and obviously being fluid, knowing that can change, rolling with the punches, but continue to operate with rankings, but be willing to move them around a little bit. But having them is already the template that you need to easily make some adjustments real time as more things develop between now and the start of the season. So let's get into it. Top 12 wide receivers. This is just, half or full PPR. If I feel there is a necessary designation between half and full PPR scoring, I will share. But obviously, wide receivers in a vacuum are a little bit more linear. Your rankings for them in half PPR are not going to be too significantly different, if at all. In full PPR, I will denote where if I think that is necessary to adjust. The 101 is not one of those wide receivers, though. Ja'Marr Chase is the wide receiver 1 and arguably, the first pick in all one quarterback drafts, regardless of scoring, regardless of format. This is chalky. I don't have much to say here, but I still wanted to make sure that this was established and brought up. He hit the Triple Crown last year, right? Chase led the league in catches, yards, and touchdowns. Doesn't really happen all that often. We can't expect it to happen again. But if there were a player that we could feel confident about making that happen, it is Ja'Marr Chase. He's a top 2 player at his position. I think he's 25 years old. He's attached to a great quarterback in Joe Burrow and a defense that is likely going to be bad. Cincinnati is going to have to score a lot of points on offense. They're going to have to be aggressive throwing the football. Burrow and Chase, by all accounts, are healthy this offseason and looking to get off to a stronger, faster start than they have in seasons past, mostly because they spent, mostly Burrow, but occasionally Chase, spent time rehabbing injuries as opposed to just practicing in seasons past. That is not the case this offseason. Both are fully healthy. They both played in the first preseason game. Unprecedented in today's NFL to see a star quarterback and a star wide receiver play in the first preseason game. That's what it feels like anyway, but it happened. They got reps. The Bengals' focus clearly is to get off to a stronger start than they have in years prior. There's no reason to feel badly about Chase. There's no reason to have any concern about Chase. Does he hit the Triple Crown again? Maybe not. Probably not. That's just a difficult thing to accomplish. But the fact that he is on the short list of 2 or 3 wide receivers that can do that can hit the Triple Crown, attached to a great offense, attached to a great quarterback. Well, it's a good offense because of a great quarterback. Which is good enough for a great wide receiver. And the defense will not be good. Chase, 101. You don't need to overthink this. We don't need to spend too much time on it or think too much on it. He should be the first wide receiver off the board in all scoring formats. And in a lot of situations, he should be the first player off the board. I can't imagine there's much argument there. You may get an argument between wide receivers 2 and 3, which is Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. For me, the choice for 2 is clear, and it's Jefferson. The hamstring injury that he is nursing right now is a minor concern, but only a minor one. We still have high expectations for Justin Jefferson because he is another, he's top 2 in the league. If you want to say top 3 with Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, that's fine. And then there's probably a slight tier break after that. But Jefferson is top 2 in my opinion. There's high expectations for J.J. McCarthy. He has not taken an NFL snap yet, at least not in the regular season. He will do that for the first time this season. So he's got a lot to prove. He hasn't proven anything, in fact. But there are high expectations for him. Jefferson, this is a good offense. Good offensive line, good offensive minds on the coaching staff, led by head coach Kevin O'Connell. He's been a quarterback whisperer pretty much all through his tenure with Minnesota. We expect that to continue with a highly talented prospect, highly touted prospect in J.J. McCarthy. And a talent like Justin Jefferson should make life easier for not just McCarthy, but the offense in general. So Jefferson is 2 for me. The difference for me, because, talking about proving yourself and, what you've done and what we can believe in, CeeDee has that in the form of Dak right now he's got the quarterback advantage. However, for me, Kevin O'Connell clears Brian Schottenheimer. And the offense in general, I think, feels a little bit better in Minnesota than it does in Dallas because I am not crazy about Dallas's offensive line. Minnesota's is better. Their head coach is better from an offensive mind perspective, and what he's proven to do with the quarterbacks that have been available to him in Minnesota to this point. I will take Jefferson 2. I will take Lamb 3. CeeDee's still a stud. Dak Prescott is healthy. George Pickens will take some pressure off of Lamb that wasn't there last year. Not that Lamb can't rise to the occasion and, carry an offense. That's how talented he is. But he doesn't have to do that as much now with Pickens there. Jake Ferguson is healthy. So, it's not just CeeDee and a bag of chips anymore. So he's got help. And I think that will help him, in a way that it wasn't there last year. And there's no contract issues with CeeDee Lamb. Last year, it was the contract dispute, so there was an off-field distraction. CeeDee ended up finishing as the wide receiver 8, so it was fine. But you drafted him probably to be the wide receiver 2 or 3. So by that measure, by his cost, he disappointed a little bit. So between the situation last year, obviously Dak getting hurt CeeDee, brought CeeDee down, brought the whole offense down. But now we can hit the reset button. Dak is healthy. The supporting cast is better. The offensive line might not be better, but the weapons around Dak are better. And there's no contract situation. There's no contract negotiation. There's no off-field distractions with CeeDee. So while he finished as the wide receiver 8 last year, we can confidently go back to CeeDee with top 3 expectations, and that's where I have him at the wide receiver 3. Not too much, not too many surprises for the top 3. I do think this is where the breaks will start as far as where you have different opinions on which wide receiver do you rank from, 4 to 7 or 4 to 8. Everyone's going to have a personal preference. They're going to have probably the same names, just in a slightly different order. But again, these decisions are critical. Getting your first round pick as accurately nailed as you possibly can. Getting a stud who, 5th overall, but they finish as the wide receiver 9. I mean, that kind of hurts. You want to draft the wide receiver 4 with pick 8. That's the goal, to outproduce ADP. It's tough in the first round, but that's why, talking through, going over our, different orders of rankings that you have for these guys, this is why these exercises are helpful. To ultimately make a call when it's time, when you're on the clock in the first and second round. Prior to, I guess, the start of training camp, and honestly for the first couple of weeks of training camp, I believe it was Puka who was being drafted as the wide receiver 4. But I have to move him down because just not confident about Matthew Stafford's situation. Right now, this is the highest I've had this guy probably all offseason long. But right now, I think I'm ranking Nico Collins as my wide receiver 4 for the season. Going into the season anyway. Concerns with Puka because of Matthew Stafford. And I just want to call out, I think it's minor, but I have a slight concern with Malik Nabers and this turf toe thing that he's got going on. He's dealing with a toe injury. I think I saw it was referred to as turf toe. It's been lingering since his time at LSU. It sounds and seems like it's manageable. But the fact that it exists and is a thing, we're being nitpicky at this point of the draft when it's so crucial to get your first couple of picks correct, that any minor thing, off-field or injury or whatever have you, no matter how minor it is, that might be the difference between me drafting that player and someone who has fewer injury concerns, fewer red flags, whether it's off-field or on-field. It seems like the turf toe for Nabers is minor, but it is enough where I would rank Nico ahead of him going into the season. I think I would draft Nico today over Nabers if my draft were today. He was on pace for a dominant season last year. Obviously, Nabers had a dominant season last year, but he did miss time, and now he's dealing with this lingering toe injury or toe issue that is not preventing him from participating in camp completely, but he is taking rest days here and there. That's fine in a vacuum, but obviously it's in part because he's nursing this injury. He's nursing this turf toe, which we're being led to believe it's minor. I hope it's minor. I don't know if it will stay minor. Injuries don't necessarily, they don't stay the same severity that they get diagnosed at. Sometimes, obviously with time and rest and all that stuff, injuries get better, but sometimes injuries don't get better. Sometimes they can get worse. So, we're splitting hairs in these wide receiver tiers, but it still matters to go over these details as far as where I would rank these guys going into drafts. It depends, because these type of details, thinking about these types of details matter when you're on the clock and you're choosing between these players, and you have to ultimately decide what matters most to you. I didn't have a mock draft scheduled for today. Just going over wide receiver rankings today. But I can certainly run mock drafts next week. I know that seems to be popular. I was going to go over some just chalk general rankings today, but I am happy to start up mock drafts again next week. And I was I started this stream a little later than usual, so I'll give more advance notice to folks next week for the mock draft, so we have a little extra time to fill it, and we won't be like relying on computers to fill the draft. So no mock drafts today. Apologies. I will definitely run a couple next week. But it's good to know that those are as popular as they are. I can just continue to run live streams with mock drafts, and we can practice. We can talk about strategy real time as they develop. I'll make sure to run those, to run a couple of mock drafts Tuesday and Thursday. We will go back to mock drafting next week. So I'm happy to hear that there is interest in them. I will bring those back on Tuesday. Okay, I was in the middle of my thought on Nico. I have Nico at 4. Again, concerns with Matthew Stafford knock Puka down for me currently, and a slight concern with Nabers and turf toe pushes him to wide receiver 5. If there were no turf toe concerns, Malik Nabers would be wide receiver 4 for me, but the turf toe is enough for me to move Nico ahead of him. He was on pace for an awesome season last year before he got hurt. Still put up pretty good numbers post-injury. Stephon Diggs is in New England. Tank Dell is out for the year. In is Christian Kirk. He's had injury issues the past couple of seasons himself. He's older at this point. I don't know what Kirk has left in the tank. The team drafted Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. Intriguing rookies. We'll see what type of contributions they have. In particular, Higgins. He was the team's second-round pick, and I think he was 34th overall in the draft. So high draft capital invested in Higgins. Again, we'll see what he can do. But all that to say, Nico should dominate targets for this Texans offense. He is miles ahead of anybody else from a talent perspective, at least right now. Jaden Higgins might develop into a nice player. Christian Kirk, the best has probably come and gone. He could still be productive, but older now and multiple injuries. Players don't generally get better from that situation as they age. Nico should dominate targets in this Texans offense. Plus, I mean, they might throw the ball a lot. Joe Mixon is hurt. Nick Chubb, I don't know how much Nick Chubb has left. Dameon Pierce might be getting, if Mixon can't play week 1, is Dameon Pierce going to be getting first team reps? Will Woody Marks be the guy that, in the backfield that is leaned on more than they plan to as a rookie? This team might be throwing the ball a ton. So I will take Nico at wide receiver 4. This is the highest I've had him all offseason long. But splitting hairs, Nico seems to have the greenest flags right now. I should have put in the ticker like who I'm talking about. So I will do that now. There. All right. I will keep that ticker updated throughout the rest of the throughout the rest of the stream. It feels weird to put a guy like Nico this high, but right now, with the concerns with Matthew Stafford, I have to bump Puka down. Nabers would be wide receiver 4 for me. We'll see about the turf toe, how long it lingers, how serious it is. It might be minor. We're hoping it's minor. We've been told it's minor. It seems manageable for Malik Nabers, but it is a lingering thing that stems from college. And since his only opportunity to get rest will be on days during the season when the team is likely practicing, how much does this affect him over the course of the season? We still expect big things, but it's enough for me to say, okay, I'm going to put him at wide receiver 5, and I'm going to put the healthy Nico Collins with limited target competition slightly ahead of him. This is the highest I've had Nico all offseason. I do not know that it will necessarily stay this way. If we get a positive diagnosis on Nabers' toe, if we get a positive diagnosis on Matthew Stafford and he's back practicing in full and the back feels good, and then we're back up on Puka's stock, Nico may move down. But for now, I'm willing to put him at wide receiver 4. That's how high. I can't believe I'm going that high on Nico Collins. But he was on pace for dominant numbers last year prior to the injury. And he should dominate targets once again. So to that, I kind of already mentioned it, but my wide receiver 5 is Malik Nabers. After a dominant rookie season last year, he would be my wide receiver 4 if this turf toe thing wasn't a thing, but it is a thing. So we have to be mindful of that. The team is managing his workload right now in training camp. I think it's something that is minor. It is not something that I want to hit the panic button on. I don't want to be the one to tell you to not draft Malik Nabers in the first round, because he is still worthy of being drafted in the first round. Unsure how big of an issue this is. I do generally lean on the side of caution when it comes to any type of lingering injury in the offseason, any lingering injury in training camp. But right now, from a bird's eye view, what we know, it appears to be something that is manageable for Nabers. He's been dealing with it dating back to his time at LSU, which means he was dealing with it last year when he had an outstanding rookie season. If turf toe is bothering him, it didn't stop him from, over 100 catches, 1,200 receiving yards. Like stellar, absolutely stellar numbers. If the turf toe wasn't a thing, Nabers would be my wide receiver 4. Because of the turf toe, it is a minor concern. We're splitting hairs this high in the rankings. It is not enough for me to move off of Malik Nabers, but it is enough for me to rank him the wide receiver 5 instead of the wide receiver 4. He's that good. He's that big of a difference maker. He's too good to fade too much. Like he is the type of player that you win fantasy championships with. He is still worth drafting in the first round. Pick 8 or 9. I mean, by that point, Nabers should be one of the top players on the board. And at that point, I'm perfectly fine taking the shot on him. Should dominate targets. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson, Cam Scatterbo, Tyrone Tracy. Like, this collective group is not stopping. I mean, we could be looking at 160, 170 targets for Malik Nabers, which is so freaking insane, but it's so very possible. If he hits those numbers, he will be a top 3 wide receiver on the season. It's just, will the turf toe remain manageable for 17 games? That's the question. So he's my wide receiver 5. He would be ranked higher if he wasn't dealing with turf toe. It seems manageable. We don't know how manageable, though. We know that turf toe historically is a painful, lingering issue that does not go away. So obviously, I'm sure there's different variations of severity. Hopefully, Nabers is dealing with a minor one at best. But we don't know. We don't know how bad it is. We don't know if it's going to cause him to miss a game or two here and there, or worse. We hope not, but we have to keep this type of stuff in mind. But all that to say, he's too good to fade out of the first round as of right now. You're still drafting him, in my opinion, with the 8th or 9th pick in half and full PPR leagues. What's going on, Rojo? Good to see you. All right, moving right along. My wide receiver 6 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Man, I'm moving a little quick. This may be a shorter-ish stream today, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions or thoughts that anybody has about whether wide receiver rankings or anything fantasy related in general. I will bring the mock drafts back on Tuesday. I know how popular that was, so I'm happy to run a couple next week, obviously with draft season fast approaching. But I wanted to make sure I did some wide receiver rankings before it got too late. Got too late in the offseason. Amon-Ra, wide receiver 6. Probably like a guy that you can get at the turn. Last couple picks of the first round. Maybe first couple picks of the second round. It would depend. I don't know how likely that is. But yeah, late first, early second round pick for Amon-Ra. I mean, the vibes are great right now with him. He's currently cooking the Dolphins in training camp practices. There's only so much stock you can put into that, but we like good vibes, right? It could be worse. It could be bad vibes. He could be not practicing at all. Knock on wood. But he's out there. He's out there. He's killing the Dolphins in training camp. We're talking about the wide receiver 3 in back-to-back seasons. He has at least 140 targets the last 3 years. There will be a transition from no more Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator, no more Frank Ragnow at center. So some stability along the offensive line is no longer there. But, I mean, any offensive coordinator would be insane not to walk into the Lions offense and clearly identify that Amon-Ra needs to have a significant wide receiver 1 workload and role in any offense. He's locked and loaded. He's going to get a ton of opportunities coming his way. Again, 140 targets the last 3 years, at least 140 targets the last 3 years, and back-to-back wide receiver 3 finishes in half PPR. If you want to have Amon-Ra ranked even higher than wide receiver 6, it's hard to blame you, especially considering the concerns with Puka and Matthew Stafford right now. I just mentioned Malik Nabers dealing with the turf toe. Again, if you want to split hairs, it's fine to have Amon-Ra ranked as high as wide receiver 4 or 5. I mean, he's finished as wide receiver 3 back-to-back seasons, so maybe me having him at wide receiver 6 is too disrespectful. But I did move him ahead of Puka. I didn't move him ahead of Nabers. Nabers is just a freak, but it's not unfair to consider Amon-Ra ahead of Nabers given this concern with the turf toe. We don't know how serious the turf toe is. I want to keep like prefacing that. Nabers is awesome. We know how good he is. We saw it last year. We don't know how serious the turf toe is. We think it's minor. We think it's manageable. That's why I have him ranked as my wide receiver 5, but we don't definitively know for sure. Will he play 17 games? Will this turf toe force him to miss a couple of games? Will it force him to miss 4 games? We don't know. Nevertheless, I have Nabers ranked 5, Amon-Ra ranked 6. But I've moved Amon-Ra up given the uncertainty, the questions around some of the other guys that were being drafted currently ahead of him. So, but the vibes are really good with Amon-Ra right now. It's understandable if you want to push him higher up than where I have him. Nabers he won't make it to the 2nd or 3rd round. So if you're out on him, that's fine. He won't, there's some guys where it's just like, he's not going to make it to, or he's not going to be on my team because he's going higher than I'm willing to take him. And that's okay. It's always just as much as it's okay to stamp your guys that you believe in. It's okay to stamp anybody that you're fading or not sure of. Nabers on talent alone is a 1st round pick. And I think he's still deserving of a 1st round grade. I would say 8th or 9th pick, but the turf toe is, it clouds some certainty around him. So it's fine to have him ranked lower if you are out on him. Yeah. Nope, that's fair. It's totally fair to be. Yeah. It's something to monitor. And he hasn't practiced for back-to-back days. So again, there's a lot of maintenance happening right now already. So it's noteworthy. It's noteworthy for sure. Okay, my wide receiver 7. This one surprised even me when putting my list together. But as of right now, it would be Puka, but I need to see, Puka would be even higher. I need to see Matthew Stafford practice and not get practices pushed back. Scheduled practices or return to practice get pushed back because his back is still bothering him. Today, right now, August 14th, I can't rank Puka this high. I want to. I had him higher all offseason long. I think I had Puka as high as wide receiver 4 earlier this offseason. I can't put him this high anymore. And when I say this high, I'm at the wide receiver 7 now. I have Puka below this, and it has nothing to do with Puka. I need to see Matthew Stafford practice, and until that happens, we have to start fading our Rams, not continuing to buy them at cost. So right now, this one surprised me even more than I thought it would. But I've got this guy high. It's Drake London. And I will explain myself. Because of course I will. First of all, I can't put Puka here. I'm calling my shot a little bit here with London. He's going to dominate targets. Puka has a Matthew Stafford problem. I've said that 5 times in the past 30 seconds. There's another wide receiver whose ADP is ahead of Drake London, and that's Brian Thomas. And I think, as awesome as Brian Thomas is, Brian Thomas may have a Travis Hunter problem as far as, expected target share. There's no such issue for London in that regard. Darnell Mooney is facing the lengthy practice absence over the past couple of weeks due to his shoulder injury. It may leak into the regular season. Kyle Pitts still very much needs to prove himself. For all the memes and jokes about Kyle Pitts and being back in, at his severely reduced cost, and he's making plays in training camp, and Michael Penix said that they're going to throw the ball a lot to him a couple of weeks ago. He still needs to prove himself. London should easily get 150 targets in this offense. And I don't know that the Falcons defense is 100% fixed from last year. Their pass rush, I think, was worst in the NFL. They drafted 2 first-round edge rushers. Was it Jelon Walker and James Pierce, I think is who the Falcons drafted. They drafted 2 guys for the defensive line to try to beef up and fix their pass rush. But can we expect 2 rookies to do that right away? I think that's no slight to them. I think that's a tall ask. I think that's a big ask of 2 rookies to drastically improve a porous pass rush. So the Falcons might still be going through some growing pains with their defense. They might be giving up a lot of points this year. That means the Falcons offense is going to have to maintain their high pace, their high volume, the points that they scored in a small sample size last year with Michael Penix. We may see the volume of plays and needing to throw the ball continuously over the course of the game, because Atlanta might struggle on defense. If Pierce and Walker could, if they make strides over the course of the season, which is natural for rookies, they get better and the defense improves over time. Okay, great. That's all well and good. That might not happen right away, if at all. So, it's twofold for London. I think he's going to see 1 million targets because Mooney is hurt and Pitts is I guess an unknown, a disappointing unknown right now. Could still do it, I guess, but he's not overtaking like London for opportunities. There's no way that's not happening. With the Mooney injury, I think London is a lock for 150 targets. I think he can easily surpass that. And I expect this to be a high-volume passing offense with a defense on the other side that has struggled over the past couple of years. They hope to have a bit of a fix in place with their 2 first-round picks this year. But that's an unknown. We'll see. And even if they do make strides, it might take half of the season. So I have London as my wide receiver 7. This is the highest I've had him all year. Puka, I have to move down given the question marks about Matthew Stafford. If Matthew Stafford works out on Saturday and practices on Monday, I will move Puka back up accordingly. But as of today, as of right now, if my drafts were happening tonight, thankfully they aren't, but if they were, I couldn't draft Puka ahead of Drake London. I can't do it. I want to, because I think Puka is one of the most talented wide receivers in football, but I can't take him right now ahead of a guy like Drake London, who does have his quarterback. London has Michael Penix. Right now, today, we do not know if Puka is going to have Matthew Stafford. We don't know. So I guess, without further ado, wide receiver 8 is where I have Puka as of right now, because there's only so far you can move a player down before talent starts to just win out. Puka, he passes the eye test. He passes the analytics test. He is one of the best wide receivers in football. I would rank him as my wide receiver 4 if Matthew Stafford was 100% healthy. I would have Puka behind Chase, Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb, and that would be it. But Stafford has been delayed practicing. He's not, he was supposed to return to practice on Monday. That didn't happen. Now he's scheduled to work out on Saturday with the plan for him to return to practice this coming Monday. If that happens, Stafford gets through Monday's practice. He's healthy. There's no issues with his back. Puka goes to wide receiver 4. But right now, given the circumstances, I can't put him that high. If I were drafting today, thankfully we're not, but if we were drafting today, Puka is not a first-round pick. He's more of a second-round pick, maybe like he's not going to fall to the mid-second round. He's too talented. Again, there's only so far that top-tier talent can slide, regardless of a bad situation. High second-round pick, I would take Puka. Mid-second-round pick, I'd be over the moon to get him. He's not going to fall that far, though. He's too good. He's too talented. But today, right now, I can't have him higher than wide receiver 8. This Saturday with his scheduled workout, and then this coming Monday where he's scheduled to return to practice, are mission critical. If it doesn't happen then, that's when we can like full-blown panic, which I don't want to do because Puka's awesome. But I have him at wide receiver 8 right now. This is as high as I can currently go. As high as I can currently go. Okay, I have 4 more names to round out my top 12 wide receivers. I will make sure to timestamp this live stream, so it's a little bit more digestible for anybody who happens to catch me later or after I'm offline. Appreciate everybody who has come in and hang out so far today. I will bring the mock draft back on Tuesday. I am happy to see that it was popular. I think I had like 4 or 5 people in there before and people asking about it today. So I'm glad to see that they're popular. I didn't have one planned for today. Wanted to make sure I mix things up, keep the content kind of all encompassing for you guys. But I'll bring the mock draft back on Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll talk shop. We will draft. We will talk strategy, and we will discuss the we'll do a post-mortem on the draft as well. We'll do some feedback on teams and how I feel about the roster construction. So Puka at wide receiver 8. He goes up if Stafford is healthy. He could still slide a little bit if Stafford is not healthy. Next week will be crucial. My wide receiver 9 is Brian Thomas. Right now, again, today, he would be above Puka, but Brian Thomas himself currently has a couple of question marks, and it has nothing to do with him. It has nothing to do with his talent, but it has everything to do with the other guy who's going to line up across from him, and that's Travis Hunter, who appears to be locked into a significant offensive role. He's going to play defensive snaps, but the team seems to be getting him ready to maybe more than not be playing on offense. That seems to be where it's headed. Could Travis Hunter ultimately still end up playing more defensive snaps this year than offense? I guess so. But that doesn't seem to be what the team wants to do. I think if they had to pick, Hunter would play more snaps at wide receiver than cornerback this year. That seems to be what they are gearing him up for. So that keeps Brian Thomas is still in the wide receiver 1 range because we saw Brian Thomas be awesome last year. But if Travis Hunter has a significant offensive role, which would make sense because he's a blue chip prospect. He was the 2nd overall pick in the draft. He's not going to exclusively play defense when you're drafted that high. He's going to play a lot of snaps at wide receiver. So is Brian Thomas going to continue to get the volume, the target share that he enjoyed as a rookie? He's deserving of a massive target share because he's awesome. But is he going to be able to is he going to get 25, 26% of the snaps with Travis Hunter on the offense? I'm not sure about that. It has nothing to do with Brian Thomas's skills. He's awesome, but Travis Hunter might also be awesome. So I feel like I've lined this up as like a detriment to Brian Thomas. It's not. I still have him ranked as a wide receiver 1. I have him as my wide receiver 9. Currently, he's being drafted ahead of Drake London, though. I would take London ahead of him. So I may not end up with a lot of Brian Thomas shares. If I'm drafting in the middle of the 2nd round and, Drake London is gone, trying to think of the running backs in that range. Like Ashton Genty is gone. Derrick Henry is gone. Devon Achane is gone. If those running backs are gone and and Drake London is off the board, yeah, I'll take Brian Thomas in the middle of the second round. That's a beautiful consolation prize. I would be over the moon to get Brian Thomas in the middle of the second round, but I think you need to draft him closer to the top of the second round, and there are just other guys that I like a little more given the uncertainty about Brian Thomas's target share with Travis Hunter in the mix. Do I still have wide receiver 1 expectations for Brian Thomas? Yes. Can I put him higher than the bottom third of wide receiver 1 rankings? Not with what we expect Travis Hunter to bring to this offense. He's a wide receiver 1 on talent and projected workload. But I would take him as more of a second-round pick in my redraft league than a first-round pick. And guys like, the running backs, Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, Ashton Genty, I'm taking all of them over Thomas, and I'm taking London over Thomas as well. Thomas is great, but Travis Hunter might also be great. And I'll be curious to see, does Trevor Lawrence have a preference between the two of them? We saw Brian Thomas's target share spike up to like 30% in those last couple of games of the season with Mac Jones. Mac Jones is not the quarterback anymore. We're back to Trevor Lawrence. And Brian Thomas still enjoyed a pretty big target share with Trevor Lawrence, but do we see Lawrence does he still prefer Thomas? Does he maybe prefer throwing the ball to Hunter? That is anybody's guess. There's no way to know that right now. You assume Thomas will have the wide receiver 1 target share because Hunter will be playing defensive snaps, and therefore Thomas will be on the field more than him. But, what does that target breakdown look like when they are both on the field? That we don't know. Moving right along, my wide receiver 10 is Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown. I may put him above other names like Brian Thomas, maybe even like Puka, but we've got a lingering hamstring issue that keeps Brown closer to his current cost as far as where I have him in the rankings. So I guess I'm in lockstep with consensus on A.J. Brown. I would put him higher, but we've got a lingering hamstring issue that hopefully it's minor. Hopefully it's something that it's just it's still August. We're still weeks from the start of the regular season. Hopefully it's nothing, but we got to keep these things in mind. If just like Nabers and the turf toe, injuries matter. Injuries matter within the tiers, and they have to be factored in even if they're minor. So right now I have A.J. Brown at wide receiver 10 instead of, maybe wide receiver 8 or 9. Still, A.J. Brown is awesome. Top flight talent at the position. And I do think the Eagles will throw more this year. Obviously, one of the issues that you had last season, if you had A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or maybe even Jalen Hurts in leagues where you get more points for throwing the ball, the Eagles were beating the crap out of teams in the second half of the season, and they were just running it into the ground because they had significant leads and a great run game and a great offensive line. I think they're going to throw the ball more this year. I think the games will be closer. I think that the schedule is more competitive, and I think games will be closer because the Eagles are going to have a target on their back. They're the defending Super Bowl champs, so everybody is going to give them their best effort every single week. I think we're going to see the Eagles throw the ball more in the second half of games this year than what we saw last year, and that boosts the prospects for guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith for me. And you could maybe throw Dallas Goedert even in there, even though he's not a favorite of mine to draft as far as like a bargain tight end. But I think Hurts will see more passing volume this year. I think A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith should see more volume this year because I think the Eagles are going to be in more competitive games for longer in each game than they were last year. So I think you're perfectly safe continuing to draft A.J. Brown as a wide receiver 1. Obviously, let's keep tabs on the hamstring injury. We want to make sure he's 100% going into the season. And if he is, there's a scenario where you could rank A.J. Brown as the wide receiver 7 or 8 coming into the year. If Matthew Stafford isn't right, Puka's going to drop. If the vibes on Travis Hunter are strong, maybe we leapfrog AJ over Brian Thomas. I don't know that AJ gets ahead of anybody else. Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, Nico, Nabers, Amon-Ra, but he's right there when healthy as far as talent level. And I think the Eagles will throw the ball more than they did last year, and that leads to more fantasy production for the wide receivers. Give me AJ Brown as my wide receiver 10, barring any issues with this minor, at least that's what they're calling it right now, minor hamstring issue. My final 2 wide receivers to round out my top 12 rankings. If anybody has any thoughts on my rankings, feel free to comment. If you see this after the fact, feel free to comment in the form of feel free to drop a question or feedback in the form of a comment on this live stream. I'm happy to talk shop on any one of the names. If you have any questions, concerns, agreements, disagreements about any of my names, my order, how I have these guys listed, anybody that I omit, I'm sure there's going to be a name or two that you feel deserves to be in the top 12 rankings that I do not have in my top 12 rankings. So, whatever thoughts are on your mind, feel free to share them, and we can have a conversation. My wide receiver 11 is Ladd McConkey. Also dealing with minor injuries that are lingering, but he has since returned to practice, so some concerns alleviated for Ladd McConkey. We expect big things from Ladd. He delivered big things last year. He's the clear-cut wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert, who's a good quarterback. The problem is it's a run-first offense. What does this lineup look like now? What does this wide receiver lineup look like now that Keenan Allen is back in the mix after signing with the team last week? Both players tend to operate out of the slot. Ladd proved he is good enough to go, on the outside, and he's capable to win anywhere, whether you line him up outside or inside. So it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Passing volume might be. That's why Ladd is not likely to ever go higher than, say, wide receiver 8 or 9 in anybody's rankings, just because volume might be an issue. His quarterback play is not going to be an issue. Justin Herbert's a great quarterback, but as long as the Chargers keep their structure intact, this might typically be year in, year out, a run-first football team from a philosophy mindset perspective going into each season. Now, we're all smart enough to know that the teams themselves know that they can't just run, and run some more in today's NFL. You have to be able to successfully throw the ball in some amount, at some level, to some degree of being capable and being consistent. And with a quarterback like Herbert, you don't want to shy away from throwing the ball. It's just, it's a bit of a clash of mindsets with what Harbaugh and Greg Roman bring to the offense. So volume might be an issue. Does Keenan Allen steal some slot reps from Ladd that would have maybe been more beneficial for Ladd's production? We'll see. Ladd's not coming off the field for Keenan Allen at this stage of his career, so it should be fine. Ladd, again, good enough to win on the outside or inside, so he should be fine. Safe enough to rank as a low-end wide receiver 1, even though passing volume might be a bit of a question. And again, his lingering minor injuries appear to be just that, minor. He returned to practice earlier this week. We have minimal concerns about Ladd McConkey. And finally, to round out my top 12 wide receivers going in to the 2025 season, I have Ja'Marr Chase as a wide receiver one, the wide receiver one in all formats. I have his teammate rounding out the top 12, beating out names like Tyreek Hill and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison, and anybody else that's going in the late second, early third. Give me T. Higgins to round out my wide receiver ones. Higgins obviously has an injury history. He's not dealing with anything at present, at least that we know about, but he has had some availability issues previously. I will be curious to see if, health is prioritized now that he's got the big payday. So there shouldn't be any issues from an availability perspective. Younger player than somebody like Tyreek. Attached to the best passing attack in the league. I think he will operate as a wide receiver one on a per game basis. Generally, when Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins are in the lineup together, their numbers are very close to each other. They both produce. They both put up big numbers, big production when they're both in the lineup. And Higgins isn't too far off from Chase on a play per play, game by game production basis when both are healthy and both make it through a complete game. Higgins is a damn good player. He has his money now, his guaranteed money. So that is in the rearview mirror. He can just focus on football. Again, the Bengals defense expected to be among the worst in the league. This is going to be a team that is in a lot of shootouts this year, and Burrow is more than capable of hanging in with another team who is lighting up the scoreboard. He leans on Chase. He leans on Higgins. You don't really need that much when you have two top flight wide receivers in the same offense. Get Higgins, I think, late second, early third is a really good pick. We're just banking on good health. So hopefully the law of averages is in Higgins' favor this year. He's dealt with some lingering stuff here and there the past couple of years. Maybe we get some good fortune, some good luck turned around in Higgins' health, in Higgins' favor as far as his health. And plays a lot of games, plays most of his team's games, and is able to deliver the wide receiver one numbers on a per game basis that we have seen from him regularly when he is healthy. I like Higgins at the 2-3 turn. He makes it over Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 12, finishing out the wide receiver one rankings. I guess I'll give Tyreek the honorable mention. Obviously, Tyreek is an all-timer, one of the best wide receivers of this era. One of the best wide receivers maybe of this, of the past 10, 15 years. I don't think that's unfair to say. He has been big time. He has been one of the most dynamic playmakers, and at his peak, the biggest, most explosive playmaker in the game. We don't know if he still has it. We think he still has the speed. Last year was a weird year with a wrist injury, which severely affected his play. So should be healthy coming into this year, although there were, he was on the injury report here and there. I don't think it's a major concern. We know Tyreek is talented. We know how good he is. There were also comments made after the season last year. He may be interested in moving on from Miami, and then he kind of walked those back. And, now we're at a bit of a crossroads for the Miami Dolphins. This is a make or break year in all likelihood for Mike McDaniel, possibly for Tua. He needs to prove he can stay healthy. And, this is a Dolphins team that over the past few years, they've struggled to beat good teams. We're looking at a bit of a crossroads season, I think, for the Miami Dolphins. And I will just say, I think there's a chance here that this kind of implodes and blows up in their faces. And I just don't know that that's necessarily a situation that I want to be attached to outside of Devon Achane, who I think will get the volume to overcome any potential issues that Miami has on offense. So while I have Tyreek as my wide receiver 13, he could be disgruntled. He's older. Does the Dolphin season go south early, and does he request a trade? And does that improve Tyreek's fantasy stock, even if it happens, depending on where he goes? There's some question marks for me around Tyreek Hill. He's still electric. He's still an awesome playmaker, but he is older. He dealt with injuries last year. Hopefully he's over that this year. But this does not feel like an entirely stable situation. Therefore, I cannot rank Tyreek as a wide receiver one. I can give him number one. He's my top wide receiver 2, but that's as high as I'm willing to go. Okay. Those are my rankings. Ja'Marr Chase, my top 12 wide receiver rankings. Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, Malik Nabers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas, AJ Brown, Lad McConkey, T. Higgins. I will timestamp this stream. I will cut it up so that it's a little bit more digestible for those who are coming in after the fact. So you can easily skip ahead to certain players, depending on the different segments that you want to listen to. So, obviously these rankings are of course subject to change. There's still plenty of time between now and the start of the regular season for developments to take place. Hopefully everybody stays injury free. We will see. Hopefully Matthew Stafford gets back healthy for Puka. Then we can move him up the rankings. Hopefully guys like Nabers and AJ Brown overcome the minor stuff and Justin Jefferson overcome the minor injuries that they've been managing over the course of the offseason and training camp. And we'll go from there. Let's see. I got a question about who to drop for to pick up Judkins. So there's going to be, I promise I'm not roasting, but but 8-man league rosters are going to be shallower, which means the waiver wire pool is going to be deeper. It's going to be bigger. You have George Kittle at tight end. He's your dude. He's your guy at tight end. I really like Colston Loveland, but you don't need him. The 49ers bye week, I don't think is until like week 14. If you want to pick up Judkins, I would drop Colston Loveland. I like Loveland, but you don't need Loveland because you have George Kittle. That's who I would drop. The other potential guy that you could drop is one of your two quarterbacks. You could drop, I don't really want to drop Fields. I know that sounds crazy, but I would rather drop Mahomes. Fields offers Konami code rushing upside in fantasy that Mahomes doesn't, not to the level that Fields does. I would drop Colston Loveland because you have George Kittle. That's where I would go. It's one of the, keep your wide receivers, obviously keep your other running backs, but drop one of the players that is like where it's the onesie position. Quarterback, you only start one. Tight end, you only start one. So you only need one of those guys. If you want to keep Mahomes and Fields, that's fine. You have George Kittle. He's your tight end. Colston, barring injury, and we don't play it safe. We don't worry about playing it safe. We're shooting for the moon, right? We're shooting for upside always. You don't need to worry about like an injury fill in for Kittle. If it happens, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. There will be available tight ends on the waiver wire that you can stream on a week-to-week basis if somebody else picks up Loveland. I would drop Loveland to pick up Judkins. That's what I would do. And yes, I am high on Drake London. I have him as my wide receiver 7. He may slide down to like the wide receiver 8 if Puka gets a healthy Matthew Stafford back. But as of today, as of right now, I have London at wide receiver 7. I expect 150 targets. So I am at the end of the chat. I have run through my wide receiver rankings. Again, I will slice up this stream so it's a little bit more digestible after the fact. You can easily find the player that I'm talking about by just scrolling along the lower third bar. I think that will do it for me this evening. I will be back next week on Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We will be mock drafting, getting some practice rounds in. Most drafts are taking place in the coming weeks. So we'll continue to practice and prepare. we can run a simulation, obviously, a mock draft. I'll give you some feedback on the team that you build and put together. And we can talk shop on what makes the most sense as far as your plan of attack, depending on where your pick is, and any other fantasy related questions that anybody may have as we approach draft season and the season in general. But I think that'll do it for me tonight. Thank you guys so much for coming in and hanging out. Appreciate everybody for taking some time. Have a great weekend, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.